I'm a podcast producer.
Mm-hmm.
I studied sound design.
Mm-hmm.
Did 1 year abroad at American University in Washington D.C., majoring in audio technology. So I'm coming from audio,
Cool.
and then I ended up doing a full podcast production. So yeah, I'm running a podcast production agency. So yeah, you
Awesome.
can you can tell podcast producer is
Love it. Yeah,
yeah.
today will be fun because I got a lot of questions for you then.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so let me go ahead and roll the intro, and then we'll just get right into the interview. And then your name is pronounced Luka.
Okay, it will be a bit hard. Djordjevic.
Djordjevic.
Yes,
Djordjevic.
Djordjevic. Yeah. It's
Luka. Yeah.
Luka Djordjevic. It's a bit hard, but I can get. So
Djordjevic.
it's Georgie is like a Slavic version of George.
Mhm.
So yeah, and basically when we are making a
Djordjevic.
surnames, we put that ich at the end. So Djordjevic. Okay. Yeah.
Djordjevic. Okay.
Yes.
Hopefully I don't
that's
butcher
it.
that too bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can edit it.
Yeah. Well, I'll dub it in if it doesn't go well. All right.
Okay. Cool.
Here we go. What is up, everybody? This is episode 4 of the Entrepreneur Project with Auston. I'm your host, Kyler. The goal of this podcast is to educate people on how to improve their lives through the stories of those that have turned their own lives around. Today's guest is an expert podcast producer based out of Serbia, if I'm not mistaken. And
that's correct.
He knows all things podcasting, so I'm very interested to speak with him today. Welcome, my guest, Luka Djordjevic.
Bravo. You pronounced it correctly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice to have you, Kylie, as well.
Thank you. So for those that don't know, and you kind of just touched on it before we got started here, but what is your background and why should people listen to this podcast today because of your expertise?
Okay, so yeah, let's start with the background first. So yeah, I'm coming from Serbia, Belgrade, a small country in Balkans, Eastern Europe. I studied sound design at Academy of Arts, and then I spent 1 year studying abroad audio technology at American University in Washington D.C. And then after graduating, I started working full time at a local radio station. But also I started freelancing as a audio and music producer. And then what happened is that in one moment when my wage was equal to my passive income that I was making through freelancing, I decided to go full-time freelancing. And then since then, I was working on a lot of projects, audio related audio projects. But then I noticed that there is a big request for podcast production. And I started working on podcasts. And soon I figure out that podcast is a great niche because your clients are ongoing clients. So, for example, when I'm working on a sound for film or when I'm producing some music track, I have a project that I have to do, and after that, I have to chase another client. With the podcast, is a great thing that you have an ongoing relationship with your clients, and you can really build a business out of it that is on a regular basis. And since 2015, I started specializing myself for podcast production, and then last year I started running an agency because the request for a podcast production on my side was bigger and bigger, and I really need to employ a team of people so I could manage all the requests that I had. So yeah, and right now, I'm in this small little studio, my home studio, where I'm doing a podcast production with my team. We are completely online, and yeah. So that would be a short background.
Yeah, so that's awesome to hear. I think I find it interesting that, I mean, what you do is such a prime business for the current economy that's happening around the world, with everybody turning into podcasts, everybody starting to work a lot more remotely. People are kind of branching out of their traditional business models and going into whether it be vocal or video type podcast. And so you were in a position saying, hey, I've got a background in audio design. I've gone to school for this. I've worked in the radio, and now, I'm here to offer my services to the masses as needed to do all sorts of productions. So how long did the current, say, COVID crisis have any effect or impact, positive or negative, with your business? Was it a good thing in terms of like people were going online, or did you actually see a reduction in business because people were kind of tightening up their pocketbooks per se?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, fortunately, in my case, I had a peak in the client requests since COVID hit. It was really beneficial for my business, this whole thing. And I know a couple of my friends who are also entrepreneurs. We were discussing last spring, and they were concerned like what's going to be with business and all things, since we are now in an economic crisis. And I was like, okay, I got your point, but somehow I believe I wouldn't be in a such a problem, because I'm totally online. Like, people are going to spend so many hours inside of their homes, and they'll need content. They want to watch, to listen. So I wasn't afraid when it comes to my business, and it turns out that I was right. I had an increase in podcast requests, and that actually resulted that I started bringing a team last summer. So yeah, I mean, and it's the same thing with any crisis. Some things will go up in the requirements, some will go off. For example, like the whole travel industry is now suffering due to the COVID impact, but then you have some other industries that are now all-time high. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic.
So with that being said, where do you, and I'm curious from my own business perspective, based here in the States, and using this as a potential offering maybe. So and my background is in video production. And with that being said, I would work alongside some video producers that were also podcast producers. So I would watch them go into various editing workflows. And I thought, oh, that looks and I mean, they're essentially simple timelines you're looking at, cutting out, splicing, all that fun stuff. But for some reason, it looked way more complicated to me than video editing was when you're just dealing with audio. How complicated or not complicated is it to produce good audio? And where do you see, maybe from an industry standpoint, the majority of your business coming in? Or is it a variety of clients per se?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, I don't find producing audio for a podcast hard. Hard to learn, especially if you're talking about straightforward solo shows or interview kind of podcasts. For example, this one would be a classical interview style podcast, where basically 90% of time you're editing dialogue, and then you have basic sound processing like EQing, compressing vocals, running denoisers, killing a bit of a room if it's an environment where it was recorded roomy, and those kind of stuffs. So yeah, maybe because you're coming from a video side, yeah, I mean, maybe it looks for you a bit hard. But yeah, it's the same thing when I start, like staring in all those, Adobe Premiere, After Effects things, and I'm like,
Mhm.
what these guys are doing right now? Like, and so yeah, it's just a thing of when you're looking from a side and not being part of that profession. So to give a short answer to your question, no, I don't find audio production for podcast hard to learn. Definitely, you need some motivation, and you need to be interested in doing that in order to succeed. But yeah, it's not so hard. That's first thing. And then second question was
Where do
my
you see
clients.
the yeah?
Clients. Okay, so 99% of my clients are US based.
Hmm.
But it's interesting when I'm talking about my clients. It's a variety actually of podcasts that we're working on. So I have a couple of clients who are into real estate, and then I have a couple of wellness clients, wellness coaches, and then I'm working on one very interesting podcast. Woman Meditation Network by Katie Kremisos, and it's a great podcast because it's actually meditation type of podcast. So it's more towards a radio drama style, where we are implementing a lot of music, a lot of sound effects. We have some visualizations in a script that we are then bringing it sonically. So, for example, if we have a scene in a script, we would use the sound effects, sound ambiances, voice, and music to build that scene around that text. So, and it's definitely that podcast is definitely different from all others because it's request for more creativity. And I think that's a great thing about a podcast as well, because even though we have a lot of those info style podcasts where we are bringing where we have that spoken word as a main content, then we can see some podcasts for meditation, some podcasts to get sleep. So we are seeing those different types of podcasts where we as a podcast producers can bring more creativity, and I think that's an awesome place to be in.
Hmm. So, my follow-up question would be, and I wanted to see if there was any overlap here. I also have clients based in the real estate industry, and
Mm-hmm.
so for that industry specific, or maybe just
Yes.
more general advice, what kind of content are you seeing being produced? Is this short form audio, maybe under 20 minutes? Is it longer interview style like this, where they're interviewing, say, experts in their field? Is it more value add? Is it more entertainment? What are you seeing from the real estate side of podcasting? And maybe why do you think it's important for agents or real estate people in general to maybe branch out into an audio or video form?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it comes to the podcast, so yeah, I mean there are a variety of formats. So I'm working on some real estate podcasts that are 10 to 15 minutes in length, but then I have like 1 hour or even 1 hour and 30 minutes long podcast episodes, also real estate related. But honestly, I found that the best podcasts are somewhere between 30 minutes and 45 minutes. And I'm always advising my clients to be in that time frame. Because that's the sweet spot where you can really tell everything in that time frame. After that, it's starting to be overwhelming, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question is let me
What types of content are you seeing within regards?
type of content. Yeah. So I definitely see a value. I definitely see value in that content, because you can. I mean, I'm working on a one real estate podcast for which I also write show notes. So and I'm doing that for 3 years so far, and I really needed to understand the content, the knowledge behind those words, not only to edit perfect audio. And what I comprehend is that actually there is a lot of value inside of those podcasts. You can really learn a lot just by like listening to those podcasts. I mean, now if I would wanted to start as I don't know, like real estate investor, I think I would have a pretty good pretty good shot, pretty good start, because I already learned a lot. And yeah, I think, yeah, for someone who is like starting out in real estate, I would definitely advise them to check some podcasts, because yeah, there is a lot of knowledge inside of them actually for free. And I think that's a great opportunity for those people who wanted to get into those waters.
So that kind of transitions to my next question. And if I'm not mistaken, we found each other in a Facebook group. It's a podcasting group.
Yeah, it was a podcast editors club. Yeah.
So with that being said, what do you see? Because I'm also in like video based Facebook groups or groups in general, and I see a lot of newcomers trying to get into the space, and some of these questions that come out of these groups seem very basic or very underwhelming, or it's like, okay, that was just like a quick Google search away. Why did you spend all this time typing this in and trying? It's like, so with that context, what do you see in the podcasting space, and maybe as it relates to the group in general, when it comes to maybe advice you would give to people that are trying to get into the space, or just newcomers in general that are getting into podcast productions?
Yeah. What
Is there something you see that's like really just like, okay, you guys should know this stuff? Or
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so I noticed those kind of situations that you're telling me right now. And I think that we see a lot of those folks, asking some basic questions inside of those Facebook groups. The first thing that I'm realizing is that there is a more and more people who wanted to get into a podcast production. I mean, that's great. That means that podcasting is getting bigger and bigger, because there is more and more people interested in. But the problem is that for people who, if you're talking about an audio portion of podcasting, so audio production, I would advise all people who wanted to get into a podcast editing to first learn the basics of audio production. So they have to learn, to use DAW. They have to, learn how to EQ, compress vocals, to learn sound editing, sound mixing, basic stuffs. They don't need to be, like highly skilled in those areas, but they have to need some basic knowledge of audio production. Because before I started working as a podcast producer, I mixed tons of music. I did a lot of sound posts for film. I did even some sound design for games. So I'm coming from a sound background, and then I saw a podcast as a great niche to put all my energy there. So I think they should first bring a bigger picture, like bigger picture of audio, and then, narrow it down to a podcast. So I think that would be my advice for newbies. Yeah. Learn the audio first.
That's interesting, because I kind of have a, I guess you would say like a musical background, played musical instruments growing up. I was in like various singing groups. I was even in a band at one point. And then getting into video production, my I would say 80% of the production was based around the music flow. Like, it's like, what what
You were cutting on a beat.
yeah, I was the very first video I had to cut to the beat. It doesn't even
Yeah.
it was like
I do the same because I'm a sound designer and musician.
it's like I'm so cued into and obviously there's a whole learning curve with that, or there's a whole there's so many layers and levels to video or music in general. Like there's people that are pitch perfect, able to sing in any key, all of those sorts of things. I'm not there, but I am very attuned and can pick up the nuances of music, and I know how important it is. Like 80% of video production, I don't know if this is a saying in the industry or not, but it seems pretty common. 80% of video production is finding the right music to cut to. And so with that background already there, I still spend a hefty amount of time attempting to find the right songs. But I know when I found it, I'm like, oh, this is exactly, it's not just for me. It's what I can put myself in my client's shoes. Like this is going to be, and even further so, I can put myself in my client's shoes. So somebody hires me, say, for a real estate video, I'm thinking about the end consumer, what they want to listen to, not what my favorite song is, not what maybe the agent's favorite song is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
you're there to serve a client. That's the difference when you have your band and you're doing something that is artistic,
yes.
And when you're doing for a client. When you're doing something that is artistic, then you wanted to put yourself out. Then we wanted to hear and see what's the Kyler's vibe. Yeah. But when you're working for someone else, then you wanted to put the client's vibe in that product. Yeah.
And I see this as like a I don't know if you'd say it's a big issue, but one of the biggest issues I see maybe in the industries, even possibly podcasts as well, but definitely video, is people, and this is for a lot of the newbies out there, but a lot of people will go and create content that they want to see or hear, which is fun and nice. But when clients are hiring you to acquire more business for them, the outcome at the end of the day should be focused on their business and what the most ideal video for that is, versus being romantic about, having every single transition involved, having all of these crazy looks going on in the video. It's like simplicity is key when it comes to even audio and especially video. It's like less is more. You could hard cut all the way through a video and have a much better video than the one who went and used a transition on every single cut. So I think that when people are getting into the space, to definitely try to keep it more simple than trying to go overboard. When I first got started in video, it was like I had to throw filters on every video. I didn't know how to normalize audio, so all of my content was peaking,
all over the place.
It was all over the place. But I very, very soon and quickly found out, going and rewatching and re-listening, I was so passionate about learning video at the time. Like I immediately started recording actually on my phone, and then I went and got a lav microphone like within a video or two, because I could hear how bad the audio would sound in my headphones. So I was like, okay, let me go and get the microphone. So then I'm recording on like a crappy tripod, my phone, and a lav, and then I go get a real camera. And so that it just kind of progressed from there, and I kind of like earned my way to nicer and nicer gear. With that being said, has social media helped you connect with your audience, or where do you seem to garner the most business? Is it referral based?
Okay, so it's a referral based most of the time. Last year I did my website, your podcast, our production. And I wanted to get back to what you were saying right now is when I was thinking about a name for an agency and a tagline, I was literally thinking about your podcast. So client's podcast, our production, we are keeping what you want, not what we want, because we're not podcasters, we are podcast producers. Mm-hmm. So we are serving you. So that was the whole idea, and that's actually what you were pointing out. Mm-hmm. Back to your question is, I'm finding clients through referrals. When it comes to social media, last year when I was building my website, I was thinking, do I want to have an Instagram and Facebook page for my agency? And I decided to skip it because I realized I don't need it. And it will be just an extra push that I need to do, especially when you're on social. Your audience is expecting from you to be there on a regular basis. So, but since I already had a pretty steady business, and I mean, I had to even put a team in a place. I decided to just stick with a website where when I'm discussing with prospective clients, I'm sending them, website where they can see all the services outlined, references and those kind of stuff. So it's a pretty kind of a portfolio of an agency. So yeah, I'm using that, and then I'm getting a lot of new clients from referrals, and I don't see a need to create a social media presence because I really don't need it. I think it will take more of my energy than I will gain it. Yeah. So my social media is really like my personal accounts, and that's it. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, what I'm finding out, what I'm noticing right now is, and we already touched based on that podcast editors club Facebook group. I see a lot of job opportunities in that group, and it's increasing. It's increasingly, especially in the last 1 year. I never find more job opportunities when it comes to the podcast than in the last year on a social media. So yeah, so for someone who is starting out, I'm pretty sure that social media exposure would be beneficial for them, but from my standpoint, I don't see that would be convenient.
That's an interesting strategy you have. I had a Facebook page, and I've been recently going through like a rebranding phase where I essentially got caught up in the mix with the crisis going on last year. I was trying to build out like a video production app at the time, and because everything got shut down and there were really no more on-site videos being done for like a whole year, I didn't know, I couldn't just keep waiting it out. So then I built this whole platform during that time, thinking like, maybe the timing will be right. I can build the momentum of this and then we'll open back up and things will be better. But it just never happened. And so I ended up having to scrap all of this content and all these pages and everything else. So I've recently, currently getting my website redone to be a much simpler, kind of like a landing page situation where people can just contact me based off like some packages, some offerings I have. But I find that interesting. You're just like, no, I just send them to my website. That is my portfolio. So I'll use like Instagram, for example, for my portfolio, which, is arguable in some sense. But what I think I see a lot of people doing, there's a couple different routes you can go with it. There's like branded Instagram pages. There's branded Facebook pages that you can send clients to. But for me personally, it's like a modern day resume in a lot of ways, if you use it the right way. So a lot of people just use it for social connection and or trying to get like likes or whatever. But my understanding is when I'm like working with clients, instead of trying to have all of that because I've worked on so many various projects, from simple shoots, photo shoots, to high-end video production with like 30,000 people live audiences, to car dealerships, whatever it may be. And it's hard to encapsulate all of that into like a branded website. And so I'll just send them to my Instagram page, and then they can kind of see from there what I've been working on from a variety of angles. So I think there's a missed opportunity with a lot of people when it comes to that. But also, it's interesting you mentioned, you're like, I just don't have those for business because everything is kind of based on my website. So you kind of just funnel all the traffic there instead, which I think is also a great idea if you can do it the right way. There's definitely a right way to build out websites, and most people overdo them or they just haven't
Yes.
updated them in 10 years or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, and you're pulling, and you're seeing a influx of work coming out of these Facebook groups, even in the past year, which means the business is growing.
And I think that's also one of the points that actually this whole pandemic is influenced the increase in a podcast production requirements.
Yeah, it's very interesting from a business perspective how people are currently navigating, and I think that's part of the reason I've been wanting to, this is recently launched, but I've been planning on doing this podcast since last year, and it was going to be kind of like a growth hack to bolster up the startup that I was working on at the time. But then when that wasn't working out, I lost interest in trying to do this. I just wasn't in the right place or the right mindset to, try to talk to people. I had to move across the country. It was just madness. But also not getting caught up in the wave of, like, there were a lot of people that went out of business this past year. And part of the reason, not the entire reason, but part of the reason, some percentage of them just weren't willing to adapt. So, for example, like the restaurant industry got absolutely crushed. But there are restaurants that were just as focused on their online presence and having their online order portals worked out versus all of these other traditional restaurants that were just focusing on foot traffic.
Yeah.
So when it comes to business in general, that's where I've been super fascinated. I have an extensive background in studying human psychology, and I worked for like a master of human psychology at one point. And so I'm addicted to observing how us as a society is currently reacting to all of this, and also where we fall in like history, like how many other times in the past has this happened, and what was the outcome then? What was the fallout? And what was the response from people during various times in history? So I think it's just it's interesting where we are in society right now. We haven't seen a shutdown like this and businesses wiped out like this. I don't think ever in a long time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. What I think the key word in what you're saying is that adaptability. So we really need to adapt to totally new rules and new play. And what I wanted to say, sorry, new rules, new play. You will edit this out.
Yeah, so with the adaptability, just moving around.
Moving around. Yeah. This is what I wanted to say. With this whole lockdown thing, they're telling us that we have to be static, that we have to be in the lockdowns, that we have to be, closed, like not moving. But I think that life is in a movement, and I'm always telling to anybody who is struggling during these times, I'm telling them move. If you cannot physically move in an online world,
Yes.
movement as not as only a physical thing, but a movement in a psychological thing as well. You have to move, you have to take action and work towards your goals. And I see also a lot of people are freezed, and they're like, okay, when this thing is passed, then I'll start working on my goals and my plans and whatever, blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, start immediately, move, because if you're at one place, you'll be stuck and you can do anything from that place.
I think that's
and who knows how long this will take.
I think that's a very interesting observation. I don't know if you were in the States during the time, but when I was younger, we had like the housing crisis here. And this is like a little over a decade ago, like 2008.
Yeah, crash. Yeah.
So there was, so many people that got wiped out then. Almost everybody was affected in some way, shape, or form. And I was young then, but not too young to like realize what had happened. And when I was growing up afterward, I kept asking myself, like, how could people let this happen? You know, where was the catalyst for all of this to go wrong? And, you know, a lot of it was like irresponsibility. Everybody was just putting the blame on everybody else. But also the fallout of that was like there were people who lost everything and were never willing to do anything after that. Like you said, they froze. And growing up, I was my mindset was like, I don't think that'll ever be me, because one, I kind of went through it in some ways, but also it's like, why, if that's how I know some people reacted, but I also know how other people reacted and they ended up making out at the end of the day, why would I? Like, I should definitely do something about this. I should be proactive.
Yeah, that's you reminded me of a quote from Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, where he's telling like what's the difference between being poor and being broke. You know, like the one who is being broke, he's just in that moment
temporary.
It's a temporary, but he's going to start, you know, like building it again. But those who are poor, those are the ones who are not taking the action. So so they're constantly, you know, like at the bottom. So so that's the point.
And that's funny, because that reminds me of another quote by this guy I used to work for named Tony Robbins, and it's like there's no lack of resources. There's only people who aren't resourceful at the end of the day. Yes. So like the resources are always out there.
Time,
the connections. Like there's another one I love. It's like, and I think I got this from the real estate industry, but it was something along the lines of 2,000 cold calls will change your life. And like just the premise behind that is like, who you want to be and where you're trying to go is like just a few connections away. And like some, you know, and then obviously work involved behind that. But if you were to cold call, if you were to make calls to 2,000 people, you know, and obviously it isn't done in a day, but if you spend, you know, a couple months just calling people, eventually something's going to happen for you. You know, like something will happen. And it's just,
you know how I got my first gig at radio? So here in Serbia, like people don't love to read emails so often. So what I did is I printed out my CV and I did the whole list of radio stations, TV stations, and I physically went to each building and I was give them my CV.
Wow!
And after like doing like 30 of those, they invited me on an interview, and that's how I get my first job. So it was literally cold calling thing. So I was just knocking on the doors, you know, like a maniac, you know, like someone of them were looking me like, look at this kid, you know, like you know, like there is no job opening, you know, but I don't care, like here's my CV, you know, like
take it anyways.
Take it anyway. But it ended up me getting a job. So
that's so remarkable, because I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in turning the tables in your favor. So what I don't think a lot of people realize is like there's like an equation involved when it comes to like getting jobs, being successful, getting hired, even being fired, all of those things. And it's a numbers game at the end of the day. It's like input is X, output is Y. And in between those variables can be changed in so many different ways, but the majority of people look at it in such a fixed way. For example, what most people typically would do, say in your case, even here in the States, would be like, okay, I want a job in radio. I'm going to go fill out 100 applications online. If that, they might do like 25 realistically, 25 to 50. And that's a lot for people. They'll do like 25 to 50 applications, and then they'll go and they maybe get a couple callbacks, but you know, maybe the interviews don't pan out, and then they're still without a job at the end of the day. And then they'll go and say, oh, that didn't work. See, I'm not meant for this, or whatever the case may be. My mindset has been for a long time now, and I was talking about this to my last guest was, how can I flip the tables to where the numbers work for me? Right. So I'm already going to be filling out these applications anyways, but how can I do it in such a creative way that I'm not just focusing on the 100 that are saying they're hiring?
On the quantity,
Why don't I go for
the quality?
Why don't I go for 1,000 of them? Because I know, because then this is what happens when you start focusing on much bigger numbers than what you think is like the society norms. You're going to get more callbacks. You're going to get more interviews. And then at the end of the day, guess what happens? You have the leverage. You now get to say, I'm going to pick and choose who and what I want to work for versus just taking the first gig. And you're also coming off in a desperate way in that regard. So interestingly enough, I just moved to the city I'm living in now 6 months ago. And I kind of spent the first few months kind of acclimating and getting used to the economy here and things like that. But right now, ironically, and I was talking to this with the last guest, I went and got a list of not all, but I guess I got a list of 4,000 real estate related businesses here in Dallas, in Texas. And it's not because like I'm only going to reach out to like 10 of them or 100 of them or whatever. It's like, no, I'm just going to hit all of them. And I'm going to get the feedback from the marketplace from like just a numbers and equation perspective. Like a scientist would go and do 1,000 different versions of the same experiment to get feedback. And then you've got a whole journal written out of like what worked, what didn't work. At the end of the day, they probably made a lot of progress. So I think people, and especially currently, even before the economic crisis that's currently happening, this was phenomenal. And I try to explain this to people. They're like, how do you... Like, I've worked at hundreds of various projects the past few years. They're like, how are you all over the place doing so much? I'm like, what else are you going to do? Like, especially as a young person, like you need to stay busy. You need to be learning. Absolutely. Life is so short. Like it should be filled with experiences, hopefully positive ones. So why not just try to fit in as much experience as possible into the shortest amount of time and not listen to necessarily what the average Joe or, girl is doing. So when you said like, I got a list of all of the radio and TV stations, it's like so few people do that. It's insane. But it seems, if you think about it, it's like, it seems like common sense. It's like, why not go to every single one? Like, what is stopping you other than like somebody's like, oh, that seems excessive. It's like, excessive compared to what? Like, I'm trying to further my life, It's like, if you look back in history, there were a lot of things that were deemed excessive, like the Roman Empire. Hey, guys, you're conquering a lot of land. Why don't you like just kind of stick to like Rome? Hey, what? Like they didn't listen to anybody. They're like, we're just going to go as far as we possibly can. We can. And I think that I think people just I don't know what it is. I guess it's the short term gains versus the long term. People are just so short term in their thinking in general. It's that short term
mindset.
That mindset that it's just like, and I think real estate has definitely helped nurture this mentality in terms of like they, a lot of it's investment based and looking 5, 10, 20 years down the road from now.
Yes, real estate is definitely something that is a long-term planning. Yeah.
So when you take that principle to any business or any idea that you're working on, I got started I got started in doing videos because I was working in real estate digital marketing. And then I started doing a lot of photo and video editing for my agents at the time. And I was like, oh, I kind of really enjoy this. Let me go ahead and like pick up an actual camera. So I picked up the camera. I go and film some local music shows for free, like just to get the experience and just to see how it is. And then before you know it, fast forward a few years, I'm my senior video producer at a working for a celebrity, traveling the country doing video production for them. And I've got no college or, any higher learning background as it relates to that. I just went and did it with the idea that like, hey, let me just do this consistently for like a long time. If I enjoy it, which I did and I still do, and then maybe something pans out. But I think for people, especially even with this podcast I'm doing, I'm on episode, number 4 right now? But I'm already looking at like episode 100. Not too far ahead in terms of like, I don't want to get lost in the like the long term. I still need to grind it out every single day. But I'm like, oh yeah, what does episode 100 look like? I wonder what that. And then once I get there, it's going to be like episode 250, and then episode 500. You know, and there's already people that I know in the influencer space or otherwise. They're like, oh, I'll be your guest at episode 20. So now I've got goals to work towards and like certain thresholds to hit. And I just find that people are so I guess that kind of leads me to my next question, which is you're based in Serbia, but you do have some experience here in the States, and you also work with US based clients. And you mentioned something interesting is that people generally aren't allowed a lot of time to check their emails where you're from. So with your dynamic view of the world when it comes to business, what do you see is the biggest difference when it comes to, say, business based in the US and business based where you're from in Serbia?
The differences. Okay. So when it comes to the States, it's definitely far more high tech, online, virtual. Here you still need to like sign physical papers with the stamps. So that there is a that gap, like. Yeah, I would say like the States are more digital and Serbia is more analog. But
only some people will get that joke.
Only some people get a joke. But being being present online and being in audio technology and spending some time in the States, I could easily lap that gap between those worlds, because definitely from my point of view and standpoint, I have to know both worlds, because I have so I can manage both worlds. So that would be one big difference. And then it's also interesting when it comes to podcasting as a format. Here in Serbia, podcasts are now something that is starting to be talked about. So like here we now have some podcasts. Let's say a good amount of people knows what podcasts are. So, but like 2 to 3 years ago, when I would say to people from Serbia that I'm working in a podcast production, I would definitely need to explain them what is a podcast. While in the States, that is something that is pretty present for I'd say 10 plus years, but we definitely see a big rise in the States right now. I think so those would be the main differences, but I easily get used to it to follow that whole US podcast market and dealing with the clients from the other side of the pond.
So to dig into that a little bit deeper, and I'm just curious from your own perspective, people talk about, and I think this has been helpful for me, people, not necessarily that I fit the bill, but people talk about immigrant mentality when it comes to business. Like the ones that seem to do well in general come from like, not necessarily, coming from like some boat overseas, but, their parents, for example, moved here with no money, or their grandparents moved here with no money. And now they just grind, they just work, and they'll outwork everybody here because they don't have any other, they can't go back to where they're from. So they have to make it work here. With what you do, and obviously you're not local, but do you see maybe from, and maybe just your perspective on this from a competitive standpoint, do you see like competition in the States when it comes to, like, you might not look at it as like a competitive thing, but when it comes to say like other, like if you're in the podcast group, for example, and somebody posts a job And then you get
Yes.
all of these people that are like, hey, I'll do it for this, I'll do it for this, I'll do it for this, I'll do it for this. But then there's like the one guy, maybe you, it's like, oh, I'll do it for this, but also here's my body of work. Whereas like a lot of these other people just don't have that because they're not just like getting it done every day. Do you see that happening? Is there such a thing in your mind as immigrant mentality when it comes to business?
Yeah, definitely there is immigrant mentality, and I think that's a general thing, not only for the States. I mean, there is also a thing here in Serbia. For example, you will see the kids who were born and raised um outside of Belgrade. Belgrade is a capital city.
Mm-hmm.
They will hustle and grind much more than the kids from Belgrade,
Mm.
because like kids from Belgrade are here from like they were born here, they were uprised here, and they are in a comfort zone that
Mm.
is, I think, very dangerous place to be, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And while other kids who are not from the capital city, they know that they have to push hard in order to stay in a capital city where they have a bigger job opportunities. So that's the same thing. That's the immigrant mentality that you're telling me. That's the same in the States. So, and yes, I can see that in the Facebook groups as well. But honestly, I don't see anything bad about it.
Mm.
It's just like someone is more motivated
Mm.
to reach that goal, and like, and if he has all they have all the rights to do it in that way. So yeah, I don't see anything bad with that. And actually, I would say that for all people who are doing on their goals, they should hustle and grind. They have to push really if they wanted to get there, because like I know when I'm talking from about myself, like when I take something to do, i'll I'll do it 150%, or I'll not do it at all. So
Mm.
I'm not that one who is taking like a 70% chance, and then like we'll see what happens. So yeah, and I think that's the best way to do it. Like once you get it, take it all over to the end. So
Go
yeah,
all in.
go all in, be motivated, push it.
Mm.
Like yeah, send your portfolio, send your website, just do it.
I love it. So we'll wrap this up in the next few questions here. Maybe and that kind of transitions into my next question is, how do you see yourself in 10 years from now? Like what is your goal? I know it's kind of like maybe a deep philosophical or more meta question, but like where are you 10 years from now? Where do you look that far ahead?
I don't. I don't. When I was younger, I was looking so far ahead, and then I realized that there is no point, like looking so far. I'm looking a couple of years in front,
Mm-hmm.
at most, because life is so unexpected. I mean, this whole COVID thing learned me that I cannot, I don't have a crystal ball. And a year ago, I had a totally different plans, probably as 99% of human society had it. And then the COVID hit, and then there is a totally different, like situation. Now we have to adapt. So I think it's good to have plan. It's good to have a plan for your future, but also I'm, but also I think it's really important to go with a flow. So
Mm.
really, analyze the market, analyze the environment, and then use those statistics and then build around it. And you
Mm.
have to always monitor your environment, because environments change, and
Mm.
you want it to be in that. Germans have a nice phrase for that: Zeitgeist.
Mm.
Zeit is time, Gast is a spirit, so a spirit of a time. So you really want it to be in the time. You really want it to be in the present, to
Mm.
really be, to be aligned with your environment, so you can prosper both privately and professionally. I mean, the thing is that why I'm now running my podcast agency is because even though it was a bit of luck, because I didn't have that wisdom that I have it now, is that in a right moment I started doing a podcast that were started growing. So it was something that was happening in that moment. There were signals that there will be an increase, that's a format that is growing, and it is a good place to be in. So look for those moments and for those spaces in your environment. You have to always analyze your environment.
I think that's really fascinating. It's also a cue to your audio background, which is environments are always changing. So
Yes.
from a sound standpoint, and I've been on enough sets to know as well. For example, you're filming a short movie somewhere in, say, a rented location, and the first 5 takes, they're pretty good, but you want to do one more, and you go and do that final take, and then a plane flies over. And the majority of the people might not hear it, but that audio guy, guaranteed, he heard that plane flying over, and you're redoing that take. Yes. So when it comes to life and in business as well, you have to look out for those planes flying over you to make sure, and you have to take those into account, because if you don't, at the end of the day, it's going to be it's just not going to be ideal, and an ideal life or environment for you. So my final question, before we wrap this up, is have you had any mentors or coaches? Or it's a pretty big thing here in the United States. People like to talk about mentorship and coaching and things like that, but I'm not sure what your perspective is on that in Serbia.
So I was not taking I just recently started taking some coaching classes, but when it comes to the podcast production, I really didn't have anyone who really learned me a podcast production. I studied that for 4 years, the whole audio production thing, and I can talk about my professors in college who were a great inspiration for me and taught me a lot when it comes to audio in general. But then through my experience with radio, that is pretty close to a podcast production when it comes to audio.
Mm-hmm.
I built around my system. So when I'm editing podcasts, I really, and producing that audio, I have some system that I built using some sound editing techniques for film, and then putting some techniques from radio production, and then just some of my things that I came up with, through the work. So that's how I built that's how I built my skills. So that's
just putting in the work, studying the game.
Putting in the work. Studying the game and putting into work, bro. Definitely there was trial and errors as well, especially during the college. That's the thing. I was recording a lot of sound for film, and I was doing a lot of location sound recording, and I know everything, about when the airplane pass fly, and the love is start hanging, and something else is happening, the dog's barking, and
it all happens at once.
And director's pissed off, and I don't know what else, and we're filming for 12 hours and I wanted to go sleep, so but all those situations actually learned me a lot, so at the end of the day, this podcast production came as a summary of all of those experiences and knowledge.
That's amazing. Well, let's wrap this up. I really appreciate you being on today. I think people, or at least I learned a ton. And it's very interesting to talk to somebody from across the pond. I always love to hear differing perspectives. And I love that you've reached out and you're like, hey, let's do this. Let's get on an interview. So where can people find you online, Luka? Are we sending them to your website if they're listening to this?
Yes, definitely. They can reach me at yourpodcast.net. That's our podcast production agency. And they can also write me at luka@yourpodcast.net.
Love it.
An email. Yeah.
if you need any podcasting, post-production, producing, anything like that, Luka is your guy. Luka, thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and send this over to you in a few days once I've got it edited.
Great, Kyler. It was a really pleasure to be your guest. It was really nice to hear some points and views from a video producer, especially because video and audio guys are
contrasting forces.
Well, I never saw them as the contrasting forces, rather as colleagues. In creating greater content.
Got it.
So audiovisual content. So yeah, it was really nice. Yeah, talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And looking forward to getting this interview edited and sending it over to you. And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great.
All right. I'll see you later.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.